It's 2017, it's March, and welcome to Women's History Month, as we have divided our calendars in many months of celebrations. So we're really happy to have you all here today to join with WCC in celebrating this quite important month. But at WCC, we celebrate women and women's accomplishments 12 months a year. So thank you for being with us today. I am Jacqueline Ebanks. I am the Executive Director of the Women's City Club of New York. I am starting today with a few housekeeping chores. Wanted to let you know that we are being live streamed as we speak. And so when we get to the Q&A section, you will be on the screen and your voice will be transmitted to hundreds of individuals outside of this room. I also want to tell you a little bit about how WCC will celebrate Women's History Month this year. We have 3 programs that we think bring front and center the role of women in the past, but more importantly today, and where we need to be in the future, starting with this presentation and this discussion with District Attorney Cyrus Vance. We will follow on March 7th with a Meet the Author opportunity, Julie Selfo, who will discuss her book, The Women Who Made New York. She goes through a series of 100 portraits of women who have contributed to New York over its lifetime. And I think it's really a wonderful opportunity and more of a social event, but you'll learn again a little history and what it means for us today. Last but not least, on March 14th, we have the future of paid leave. I think many of you in this room know that in 2016, New York State passed the strongest paid family leave law in the country, which will allow millions of New Yorkers to take paid time off to bond with a new child or support family members with serious health needs. But that law takes effect in January 2018, and unless we're prepared as a population to take full advantage of that, we won't have a successful implementation of the policy. And so on March 14th, we are partnering with Time to Care, the New York Paid Leave Coalition, to have a discussion on this critical piece of legislation and to discuss how we as women need to carry the word forward into our communities to ensure that we have positive uptake of this significant benefit. The information I just shared, we have announcements available at your registration desk. We'd encourage you to pick them up and please invite a friend and come along yourself. I have just one other announcement, and then I will turn it over to our president, Annette Schulfeyen, who will make brief remarks. WCC in the past years produced our citywide guide for resources and services and resources, one per borough. This is a listing of low and no cost services organized by service category or by population in need and arranged by community boards within each service category. It's also available online, but we want to encourage you that if you would like to receive a print copy, please take a moment at the registration desk to sign up. We're happy to mail it to you at no cost. And with that, I want to just first say a special thank you to District Attorney Vance for being available here and meeting with us today. We look forward to a very engaging discussion and invite Annette Schulfeyen to the podium to make remarks. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We know that we're here, and I take a deep breath, as I think most of you do as well, with the world that we're dealing with. And tonight we're going to have a conversation with one of the foremost advocates in so many of the ways and issues that we have all been party to and part of. Before I go further, I'd like to say thank you to our John Jay colleagues, President Jeremy Travis, and he may come by later, but just want to say to him, thank you, thank you, thank you. And most of all, our Public Programs Committee and the work that they did. Chairman Mary Ellen Rudolph. Mary Ellen here yet? Things are crazy out there, let me tell you. And I went to 4 entrances before I found this place, so who knows? I think we have a lot of people walking around. Helen Aronstein. I'm going to call them off. They're not all here. Helen Birnbaum. Virginia Castle. Elizabeth Lupton. Debbie Meyer. Mary Murphy. Where's Mary? She's got to be around here someplace. There she is. Rochelle Stearns and Ellie Sokonis. All have worked very, very hard. And last but not least, our staff, who put in hours and hours. Jacqueline Ebanks, Executive Director, who you've met. Anya Berdan. Anya, where are you? Oh, she's outside, I think, looking for people. Member Services Manager. Deborah Cameron, our Finance Manager. Meisha Mito, Research and Policy Fellow. Dina Sadiq, Administrative Manager, also outside. And Padma Simangal, who's our Program and Communications Manager. And all of them have been. I hope you get a chance to meet them sometime through the evening. They're here. 101 years ago, the Women's City Club started to engage in the issues that we're still engaging in. It hasn't changed. Things have gotten better in some areas, but they haven't in all areas, or maybe most, we might say. At that time, the women who organized this wonderful organization sought to assure that women had permanent central roles in shaping the future of New York City, and that they would no longer be excluded from civic life. Now remember, this wasn't a search for the vote. It was a search to affect civic life, daily life, for women to be able to have their voices heard. The object of the club would be to take up various city problems as they present themselves to back all movements for city betterment along social and political lines. We find ourselves today looking back and listening and reading about our founding mothers and saying, you know, they were so right. They were so strong. And it is imperative that we carry that torch forward. All of what has been done cannot be lost. And the future is ours to shape. We have, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I think we all know, and I think you will to some extent, hopefully, District Attorney, we all know that we're losing ground in terms of rights, civil rights, not only of women, but of many, many different factions in our community. The face of our world is changing, and we have to decide, are we going to let it happen, or are we going to participate in pushing back and preventing it from changing so that the legacy that we leave for our children is one world that they can live in and be happy and safe in? So we have been talking at the City Club about these issues and how we need to redirect in many ways our efforts. And tonight we're going to have a conversation, as I said earlier, with one of the foremost advocates in gun control. You name it, Cyrus Vance has taken the right and the strong position in that area. He has been a district attorney in New York City for years, And we are sharing with him all of the issues that he's fighting for. And we're going to learn, and hopefully tonight, and have a conversation about what is happening and what it is that we can do individually and collectively to move forward and not lose ground, but gain ground. So it's really my pleasure. I don't want to waste any more time. You can read about all the things that District Attorney Vance has done. It's in the program, and you're all impressed already, so I don't think you have to. But if you want to, you can. Please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really flattered that you asked me to come for conversation. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of talk through some of the issues that I see in the work that I do, and talk about those issues in a way that I think shows me that I think there are ways to move forward at times like this, and what gives me the confidence that there is a way forward when there seems to be so much division everywhere, and it's something we all have to deal with. It's great to participate at a lecture with this distinguished group of men and women, and for this distinguished club. I certainly understand strong women. I have 4 sisters, and besides my mother, and they taught me a lesson early on about the power and commitment that they brought to their careers and their lives. And I just have to say, because because it is partly my job, I was down with my wife, daughter, and some friends to the march in Washington about a month ago, and I don't know how many of you were down there. I know there was a great one here in New York City, but it was an incredible experience. And I mention it because there were 500,000 plus people in Washington. I didn't see a single police officer all day. And it just goes to show that if you put women in charge of a complicated project, you're going to get amazing results. And I must tell you, about 65% of the lawyers in my staff now are women. So the world has changed. Thank God for that, and more to come. So I have to start talking about talking about how we reach a way to work together about a case that has really been a very powerful one to me personally, clearly to the family of the victims that I'll describe, but it's very much on my mind and has been in the 7 years I've been district attorney, where I had committed to the parents of Eitan Pates, a young 6-year-old boy who disappeared in 1979, that I would reopen the investigation of his disappearance in the hope that by casting fresh eyes on a case that was nearly 40 years old, we might be able to find out what happened. The family obviously had been devastated. There's really no way to describe the emotions and the suffering that they've been through. But it's not every day that you get to go back 40 years in time and Okay. Sorry about that. Is this better? Yes. Oh, thank you. So it's not every day that you get to reach back in time 40 years and correct an injustice. But that's exactly what our office was able to do some 2 weeks ago when a jury returned a verdict of guilty against the man that we believe and they determined killed young Eitan Pates in 1979. And it's a story. It's a very powerful story. Eitan at the time was 6 years old. He had been hammering on his mother to let him walk to the school bus alone. And this was the first day that she was convinced and to let him do it. So she packed him off about 2 blocks to the school bus area, but it's around a corner. He had a little a hat on and a backpack and $1 in his hand because he would go with his parents to the bodega where the school bus was during the weekdays and buy a soda. And Julie Pates set him off. Eitan went off toward the school bus, and he never came home. What happened to Eitan was terrible. We believe that he arrived early to the school bus, and the stock boy at the time, a 19-year-old, Pedro Hernandez, who Eitan no doubt recognized from the store, probably lured Eitan into the basement. It's one of those basements that you walk down in New York City off the street. You just walk down. Probably to say he was going to give him a soda, and we believe there was a confrontation in the basement, and my best guess is it was a sexual confrontation. And Eitan resisted, and then Pedro Hernandez strangled him, put him in a black plastic bag, garbage bag, and put him in a banana box, stuffed him in a banana box, this 37-pound boy, and then took the box to get rid of it and get rid of the evidence to a garbage, a place where garbage was stacked up about 2 or 3 blocks away, and Eitan was taken out with the garbage, we believe, the next day to New Jersey and never seen again. He was a beautiful, as all 6-year-olds are, he was a beautiful kid. He was loving and loved. And when Eitan didn't come home that evening, it was the Friday of Memorial Day weekend in 1979. When he didn't come home that day, that family's life was changed forever. And for years and years and years, they didn't know, what happened to him. Was he alive? Was he trafficked? Did he know that they were still looking for him? And obviously, this is a very emotionally powerful and terrible situation for the family. And it was, and I think it affected all of us. I think we as a family of New Yorkers changed forever. I think we lost our sense of innocence about what could happen in our own backyard to our own children, which we never really thought about, I think, in a community sense before, that our children could disappear. And of course, Eitan became the beginning of a powerful movement to help find lost children in America. And he was the young boy that was whose picture was put on the milk cartons in an effort to get awareness about the fact that he was missing. And the case that ultimately ended up being brought to court was unique, and it had twists and turns over the course of 7 years and actually the 38 years that Eitan was missing, that sometimes encompassed different theories and different suspects. And I certainly had no idea when I was starting law school in 1979 that someday I would have to decide whether or not to bring an indictment against Eitan Pates's killer. It was a complicated case. Some of you have probably read about some of it in the paper. It involved a series of admissions by Pedro Hernandez to killing a boy in New York City over the course of many years to many people, but there was absolutely no forensic evidence that existed, nothing physical that could be brought to court. There were no Metro cards. There were no video cameras on street corners. It was really going back to 1979 and trying a case in a 2016 courtroom as if you were in 1979. That's what we were dealing with. It was very challenging. Now, you may think it was a tough decision to go forward on that, and I'll tell you that the deliberations we had in my office on that case were long and prolonged. What was the right thing to do? But once we reached our decision that we were going to put the case in the grand jury, we did so, and I did so with complete confidence that we had the right man. The question was, could we convince a jury that we had the right person? Because over 40 years, the quality of evidence can deteriorate, and obviously jurors should be and are suspect and critical thinkers. Well, I really want to talk about the jury, which is where I'm going with this. And there are lots of quips that we New Yorkers read about us. We're liberal New York Times subscribers. We're kale addicts. We're limousine liberals. But the truth is that Manhattan Island is a remarkably diverse place. Our citizens in Manhattan range from the richest in the world to some of the poorest in the world. Some among us discover amazing scientific things, and others of us in this community don't know how to read or write. Our residents here speak every language, and I think Manhattan is diverse as the human race is diverse. And I mention that because when we started the Hernandez prosecution, we knew that ultimately we could not succeed unless we could convince 12 people, our jurors, whose names would be selected at random from a revolving drum, just like you'd see in the movies, that Pedro Hernandez was guilty of this murder. And could we convince them beyond a reasonable doubt? And could we convince them unanimously? The first trial involving Pedro Hernandez ended in what's called a hung jury. 11 jurors voted to convict. One juror did not, and that meant the case went into something called a mistrial. And that meant we had to try the case again. The first trial took 6 months. The last trial that we just finished took 5. And this time, after 9 days of deliberations, the jury voted unanimously to convict Pedro Hernandez. So having lived through that jury deliberation and many, many others in my career as a trial lawyer, I want to say, and I hope you'll permit me to talk about just personally, the work of all these juries that our lawyers and in my practice has shaped actually my understanding and my view on the democratic process, which is where I wanted to come on this. What does this system tell us about how to get through what we're going through today? And I can explain this quite simply. And the effect that I think juries have is that people of good faith from a variety of backgrounds can reach consensus regarding some of the most impassioned and controversial matters that are placed before us. Now, in this day, any of you who've spent 5 minutes on Facebook or on the internet probably think that I'm crazy when I say this, but I will talk a little bit this evening to start and try to convince you that when it comes to crucial, value-laden, life or death issues of criminal justice, and certainly criminal justice is one of those areas that is in division in our country, real consensus is within our grasp, and we have to reach and work for that. But I think we can achieve it. In this regard, when I became DA, I had an important conversation that was instructive to me with the Corrections Commissioner from the New York State Department of Corrections, Brian Fisher. He's an amazing guy. He's retired now. And he gave me a tour I was taking a tour, and I've now been in many state correctional facilities, of one of those facilities. And I saw the vast challenges that Brian Fisher had to assume in overseeing this large correctional institution. And I asked him what I could do as DA to help him do his job. And he said, Cy, what you can do is you can deal with mental illness and deal with mental illness on the front end and stop sending us so many people who are mentally ill. Now, of course, he's right about the state of affairs of corrections. Study after study shows that our prison system is, in fact, populated significantly by folks with a great variety of mental illnesses, from the very minor to the very severe, schizophrenia and the like. It's important to know and to understand and accept that mentally ill people are no more likely to commit a crime of violence than anyone else in the population. But as people unsupported descend often into a spiral of joblessness, homelessness, and substance abuse, eventually apprehension for a crime is something that will happen to them. And at that point in our justice system, we really lack good options on how to deal with folks with mental illness who have committed crimes. And we as a society really throw our hands up in the air and just send the person to state prison because there's nothing else that we have found to do with that person. And I think that's a shame, but it is it is the way things are. Now, Brian Fisher and other enlightened correctional facilities professionals struggled and tried to provide mental health services to this difficult population, but it's been a losing proposition. Correctional institutions, even the enlightened ones, and even the enlightened commissioners like Brian, are hardly ideal settings to treat mental illness. As with so many other problems, by far the better approach that we should be taking is to address this problem before it escalates and becomes a criminal problem. And in the case of the mentally ill, that means providing services in the community before imprisonment becomes the option of last resort. So what we decided to do to work through this challenge and problem was to work with great groups like the Center for Court Innovation and start what is called a mental health court in New York County in Manhattan, where professionals screen felony arrestees, primarily nonviolent cases, and select out of that pool those whose criminality seems to be the product of mental illness. They committed the crime, but they committed it because they were suffering from mental illness. And unless you treat the mental illness, they'll keep committing the crime. So trying to deal with the underlying issue. These cases are then sent to a special court part in our courthouse, and then a team of professionals gets together and devises a plan of treatment specifically designed to meet the needs of that individual defendant. Periodically, over the course of the case, the defendant has to come back to court. The case officer who's responsible and working on that individual's case reports to the parties about how the individual's doing and how the work is progressing. Now, this is a tricky population, obviously, those folks who have significant mental illness, and I think many believe that this sounds like a program drenched in good intentions, but doomed to fail when put to the test. As I said, this intake population presents some of our most stubborn societal problems, among them homelessness, addiction, mental illness, criminal recidivism, and these are problems that have been notoriously intractable in our communities. Just look at the challenge we're dealing with, some of our homelessness challenges today in this city. But I want to reassure you by giving you just a single statistic, which gives me hope. For the vast majority of the individuals who come into our mental health court, graduation from that actually represents an exit from the revolving door of criminal justice that they have been locked into. In the 5 years of the operation of this program, only 18% of the court's graduates have been rearrested, and it's mostly been for very minor offenses. But I got to tell you that more important than any statistic about recidivism is what you would observe if you come with me, and you can any day you want, to this courtroom in Manhattan. You'd see at the end of this process a group of highly motivated individuals who've been charged with crimes but are working through it. They're determined to make the most of their second chance. You'd see supporting them a cadre of professionals, mental health, social workers, and others who are helping these individuals confront their problems and overcome them, and determined to bring resources to deal with this big issue problem of the mentally ill and our criminal justice system. You'd see clear-eyed former offenders linked to support systems in the community, infinitely better equipped to handle the challenges of life out in the community than they would have been if they had spent time in Rikers Island or in an upstate prison. And that's also what I mean by bringing consensus to the criminal justice system. When a program like the Manhattan Mental Health Court works, there are no losers. The graduates benefit, and because treatment is much cheaper than incarceration, us taxpayers benefit. Because recidivism rate is so low, the public benefits. Now, this isn't just a one-off program. I feel, and I've experienced in my time as DA, anytime we focus on crime prevention as a strategy, we produce outcomes where there are only winners. And so that is why our office, besides doing the work that you traditionally associate with DAs, which is enforcement and trials and prosecution, is we are investing a lot of our time and our resources into preventative strategies in our communities. It's a very favorable investment when we talk about crime prevention, but funds are needed up front to make this investment succeed. And with budgets that are tapped and stressed among all our institutions, the question is, where are we going to find the resources to do work like we do in the mental health court? For us, last year, working with the City University of New York CUNY, Institute for State and Local Government, we established what we call the Criminal Justice Investment Initiative, or CJII. Over a series of years, we have done very large investigations into foreign banks who've been moving money illegally through our banking system and disguising that the source of those monies are related to sanctioned countries like Iran, Libya, and Sudan. So banking for these countries associated with terrorism and human rights abuses. And these investigations over the course of 7 years, we've done 9 bank cases, and because of the forfeiture statutes, a significant amount of money came to our office by statute, which we were stewards of, and we had to make investments in. So over the past year, for example, we've invested $100 million in NYCHA, our city housing, the 15 most violent developments, because 26% of violent crime occurs in these housing developments, while only 6% of the population lives in them. So we have invested in the most violent of those to provide resources they need, like lighting and prevention strategies, cameras, and the like. We've committed $41 million to the mayor's mental health initiative to try to deal directly and provide education to the police officers on how to deal with the mentally ill, as well as resources for the mentally ill when they confront and are brought into the criminal justice system in the first instances. We have funded college programs in state prison because we know that a college degree to an offender in prison is the most effective way to have the smallest chance of recidivism. And we are actively investing in strategies around reentry, which is supporting individuals who come out of prison back into the communities to have them have opportunities and places to live and a way forward because, quite simply, if we don't provide that assistance, they're going to be back in our courtrooms as defendants again. And so it makes sense that these preventative strategies are ones that we would want to pursue. And if I ask this group, which do you think is better, prosecuting a 16-year-old for having a gun and shooting someone in a Manhattan street, or preventing the gun from getting into the kid's hand in the first place? Well, I think everyone would say that's a no-brainer. But as law enforcement, we didn't really think this way until relatively recently. And for us, because of our ability to invest in what we think are transformative in criminal justice projects, we are very excited that we can actually, at scale, make investments in our communities that we think can prevent crime, improve lives, and continue the incredible decline in violent crime that Manhattan has experienced over the last 15 years compared to other cities like Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore. Now, there's one investment that we made with this, out of this $800 million investment fund, which deals very directly with women's rights. And I want to share with you some of the initial results that we have in this area. You all know that when a woman or a man is sexually assaulted and they go to a hospital, they undergo a process which involves what's called a rape kit. The woman's body becomes a crime scene, is a crime scene, and with man or woman, and she is prodded, scraped, terribly difficult for all the obvious reasons. After the assault, invasive, intrusive. And the point of it is, though, to get evidence from the crime scene, her body, biological evidence, out of which you can draw what's called a DNA profile of the offender, the attacker, the rapist. And when you have that DNA profile, you can then upload it into a national system where the DNA profiles of convicted offenders are stored, people who have been previously convicted of a variety of crimes, federal and state. That evidence is analyzed, as I say, the DNA profile is shared, and this protocol of dealing with rape kits and getting this evidence is one of the most potent weapons we have to find those men who are committing sex offenses and get them off the street and prevent them from offending again. It's hard for me to believe it, and it may be hard for you to believe it, but all over this country, jurisdiction after jurisdiction, these rape kits were being prepared after assaults, but they never were analyzed. And they were sitting, and they have been sitting in warehouse shelves and police officer garages for years, sometimes decades, and never have been analyzed. And in each of those cases, a woman who had cooperated with the law enforcement, reported the crime, has to live with the knowledge that her assailant may still be out there, and no one has actually done the first step to try to find out who typically he is. I don't know of, I think it's outrageous. And I think when I say it's a question of equal rights, I don't know any other evidence that is discarded and disregarded in other criminal cases. When you have a gun, it's tested for operability. When you have drugs, you test them to determine what's the nature of the drugs. Why is it that when the crime is rape and the victims are women, do we ignore testing the evidence that might in fact find the attacker? And when we've not done this, it sends two very bad messages. To the women, it sends the message, we don't care what happened to you. And to the attacker, it says, it doesn't matter what you did because we're really not going to look for you. So I was very, very, very influenced by some very smart women around me in my office that we should do something about this and that we had an opportunity to do something. And I think we had I don't want to be too highfalutin, but I think we had an opportunity with our funds and a moral obligation to step in and take this on. So in September of 2015, together with Vice President Biden and Loretta Lynch, who was Attorney General at the time, we collectively announced what was a collaborative, really massive program to fight this injustice. Our office committed $38 million, and the federal government matched our funds to enable 32 jurisdictions around the country to begin processing some 70,000 untested rape kits, which, by the way, is probably still well shy of the number of rape kits that are out there and still remain untested. But we're not giving up on that. Now, that investment in testing those kits is going to give us far-reaching returns. A year into our initiative, police across the country have made 70 arrests of cold cases where they would not have been able to solve those cases had we not processed these kits. These are very preliminary results because there are still tens of thousands of kits that are being collected and analyzed now. But the rate of hits against the number of kits is extraordinarily high. So, as I say, the DNA profile, if we can get it from a rape kit and it matches someone in the national database, we call that a hit. And we've had 2,500 hits thanks to that funding in the kits that we've submitted for testing, which is about 6,000. So it's about 50%, 40 to 50% of the kits that are sent for testing biological evidence and DNA profiles have been drawn out, which hit about 40% of the time. Now, not all those hits are going to be the solution to a crime, but it's a huge step forward in determining what happened and who did it. Now, in the ordinary and rational world, this budgetary issue about funding rape kit backlogs would have been a non-issue, and every one of these kits would have been processed as it should have been. But for whatever reason, it didn't happen, and it didn't happen in many places across the country. But we felt that we had the resources and the responsibility to work to convince our federal partners, by the way, to get in and do this with us. and that we could right some terrible injustices and do good work around the country. And that's what I also mean about finding consensus in criminal justice. We have an intractable problem. It affects thousands and thousands of women around the country, principally women. But by joining forces with the federal government, committing that we can do something, we actually work through, and I think we'll continue to work through, one of what I think is the most embarrassing criminal justice stories, at least of my time working in criminal law. Instead of just being divisive about it and producing hostile rhetoric about the issue and finger pointing at folks who we think hadn't done their job, what we decided to do, what the women in my office enabled us to do, is to find consensus that left everybody better off. And my point is, I see dimly, but I see this kind of consensus forming around basic questions around crime, incarceration, and race in the criminal justice system. Now, 80% of the cases in our office occur in our lowest court, which is called criminal court. Those are misdemeanors. And it's a court system that is so overburdened that the defendant who comes into that system literally receives nothing by way of intervention or help in his or her life to address how that person got into the courtroom in the first place. I'll tell you, in a moment of exasperation, one of the judges in our courthouse, remarking on this criminal court situation, said to me, the system is the punishment for these defendants, having to come back time and time and time and time again until the case somehow is resolved one way or the other. And when you add to that the fact that a disproportionate number of individuals in the system are young men and women of color, that indifference to how we manage this large criminal court that handles a large percentage of our cases is really disturbing. Every open criminal case that we have in court, even with a promise of dismissal at the end of a probation period, can have immigration consequences, or prevent someone from getting a job, or prevent someone from getting housing, or even from enlisting in the armed services in some cases. And online records of someone who has been arrested or a story in the news lasts forever. And that is why several years ago we decided that we would launch an ambitious program to focus on nonviolent lower level offenses and try to identify those men and women who are committing them and divert them from being processed as criminal cases in the first place. At the precinct, giving young men and women the opportunity to do community service, complete their community service, and if they do that, the case is never logged, there is no prosecution, and they are able, hopefully, to go about their life. The community, of course, I think wants its young men and women, wants to this kind of result, that they be, that those, if folks are doing minor crimes, that it's appropriate that their service be in the community. And we started this focusing first on 16 and 17-year-olds. It's called Project Reset. And we focus, as I said, on low-level offenses and first or second-time arrestees. We are now expanding this beyond 16 and 17-year-olds to all defendants in Manhattan. And we believe by this process, we will probably pull out of the criminal justice system 11,000 cases that would have otherwise come into our system. And it's been a real focus of mine to try to address more thoughtfully who we are bringing into the criminal justice system and why, and what's the best outcome. As I said, I surround myself with a lot of smart people, and over the last 4 years, we have reduced our misdemeanor and violations, even one step below a violation, cases per year from 86,000 to 63,000. So that's 25% decrease in the last 4 years. And we're going to get, I believe, down to 50,000. And we're going to get there without sacrificing public safety. And we're going to get there also by working through this with the police department, spending in sometimes years talking with the PD about why we should not arrest people who have old summons warrants from 20 years ago, because that's, what sense does that make when we then have to have resources dedicated to prosecuting a summons where someone urinated on the street, or had their dog off a leash, or had 2 feet on the subway? There are literally people out there who have warrants for those offenses, which is why we started and now have a program called Clean Slate, where folks come in from all over the city and can have these old warrants cleared out. And pretty soon, as some of you may have read if you're courthouse observers, we're going to work with the PD and we are going to dismiss these outstanding summonses that are more than 10 years old so that we can get those off the books, not require police officers to expend valuable time away from the streets, taking someone back to court when that person's been out of trouble for more than 10 years, not have judges and prosecutors have to expend their time on these old cases to someone who is not a criminal justice risk. And the young offender or the person with that warrant doesn't have to see the inside of a courtroom. Youth diversion is just one way that we can, I think, enhance safety and fairness, but not sacrificing risk to the population. But there's just much more we can do. I truly believe that the role of law enforcement in the 21st century is not just about arrest and prosecution. We can, and I think we do, deliver greater public safety and greater fairness and healthier communities if we focus on prevention and not just prosecution. This Monday, it was a great day. We were at the Door, which is a sort of a hub just in South Soho. And what this smart group of people around me, again, all women, have been working on for the last 2 years is to, and working with CUNY, is to find the best way to move our criminal justice, some of our criminal justice dollars, into the grassroots community. Now, we've given large amounts of money, $100 million to NYCHA and other city institutions. But what we were hearing from the experts, not just at CUNY, but from the 250 experts that we talked to around the city about what was needed, was people said we need to get the dollars out and down into the community, funding the local organizations, sometimes which may be 15 people in the organization. And what we've decided to do is to create 5 youth hubs in Manhattan. These are physical locations. We will fund the construction where necessary of those hubs. And each hub, so for example, Union Settlement, Upper East, East Harlem will be a hub. Henry Street Settlement, Lower East Side will be a hub. Soul Saving Church in Central Harlem will be a hub. We'll have a West Harlem location, and then in Washington Heights, Columbia Presbyterian actually is going to be the hub. And in order for them to get awarded the RFP, they, number one, had to meet the requirements for what we were looking for, but they then go out and they contract and, like spokes off the hub, go out to the smaller organizations who then bring those services into the hub and have them available to kids. And the services range from navigators who are going to be Hunter College students who are going to volunteer and get credit presumably for being assigned to a family or a young man or woman to help them navigate particular challenges they may be facing, whether it's school or whether it's gangs. There'll be a trauma-based interventions. There'll be family support. It's designed to really focus on crime prevention in a way that I don't know anywhere else that's doing it this way right now. That's because no one else has the 5 women who work with me. And I'm not going to let them go. So, addressing the issue of youth and violence, it's a very fraught issue, but I think it's one of the most important issues that a DA like myself has to deal with today. And let me give you one more example where I think we can find consensus. I recently sent a letter to President Trump on the subject of gun violence. I'm co-chair of a large collaboration of prosecutors, which I founded with my LA counterpart, called Prosecutors Against Gun Violence. It's about 25 or 30 large city DAs, and our members come from big states and small states, northern, southern, Democrat, Republican. And one thing unites all of us: a non-ideological agenda to halt gun violence, relying entirely on common sense proposals. So let me give you one example. The recent research, the recent report that we produced out of Prosecutors Against Gun Violence, which is entitled Firearms Removal and Retrieval in Cases of Domestic Violence, shows that more than 3/4 of the women killed by intimate partners were stalked prior to being murdered. And so Prosecutors Against Gun Violence says if someone is convicted of the crime of stalking, federal law should prevent that person from obtaining a firearm. Our letter to President Trump ran 7 pages. And you will search in vain. You will search, and I'm not sure he's going to read it all, but you will search in vain among those 7 pages for a proposal more controversial than the one I just outlined. Nor will you find anywhere in those 7 pages a single line of high-flown rhetoric, nor any cheap shots that we are taking at anybody. We are not trying to score points, but to build consensus, confident that consensus is possible. So, when you get home tonight and turn on your television or listen to talk radio or then watch your news feed on Facebook, and you are plugged back in to the cacophony and the disagreement and divisions and recriminations, perhaps you may lose this moment of clarity and despair and doubt whether our nation will ever reach general consensus about anything, much less about gun violence. But should that happen, should you go back in despair, I'd like you to keep in mind the image of a jury who come to a case not knowing each other from all walks of life with the simple mission to listen to the evidence, be charged by the judge, and to come to a consensus conclusion. Jurors, rich, poor, of all ethnicities. And when you think of that, perhaps you'll think like I do, that juries teach us the meaning of sacrifice, they teach us the meaning of public service, and they teach us above all that it's possible to hold fast to one's own opinions and principles while at the same time seeking to compromise and reach a consensus conclusion. So in short, every day, juries, not just the Pates case, but juries in every courtroom in New York City and around the country teach us that democracy is possible, and that at times it is messy and inefficient and crazed. Democracy is, to me, the most effective way that's ever been invented of governing in fairness and in justice. So I resolve, and perhaps you would consider resolving, on to consider that even when it seems as if there is no way forward and that the very fabric of our nation is being tested, to maintain our faith in democracy, and above all, our faith in each other. Because like jurors, if we talk with each other, if we're honest with each other, and if we seek to find a way forward with each other, it's not easy, but it can work. And it works, as I hope I've described, in some of the areas in criminal justice that are as fraught with problems as any other issue in America today. Race, use of force against citizens by police officers, prosecution misconduct. We're working through these things, I believe, by just dealing with them and talking about them and not being defensive about them. So, Jackie, thank you. I did not cover a number of the subjects that folks may have questions about, and I'm happy to field questions, but I defer to you on how much time you'd like me to spend.
Thank you so much. This is our question and answer period, and I'll look to you when you
No,
And you tell us when it's okay. Okay. I'm going to start at the back of the room now. It's one mic and it's me in heels. So.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much, DA Vance, for speaking to us tonight, and thank you, Women's City Club, for organizing this event. I'm Jane Manning, and I'm with NOW, the National Organization for Women. We've been sister organizations and partner organizations, and so thank you. Thank you for holding this event. DA Vance, we so appreciate your funding of the backlogged DNA kits, which hold so much promise for bringing perpetrators to justice in stranger rape cases. But stranger rapes are only about 30% of all the rapes that happen. The large majority, 70% of rape cases, are committed by someone known to the victim. And I want to talk to you and ask you a question about a subset of those rape cases. And they're drug-facilitated rape cases. We have the Bill Cosby case going to trial in June, and with it, we see a real opportunity to come to grips with a crime that we believe is becoming more prevalent. We see it happening here in New York City. We have young women coming to us who have been devastated by this crime, having been drugged and sexually assaulted. It's a crime that's gravely under-prosecuted. And the prosecutors who we see succeeding in bringing these perpetrators to justice are doing three things. One is they are making regular use of drug recognition experts to counter the difficulty that toxicologists have finding and identifying these drugs. So the drug recognition experts. Number two, they are doing offender-focused investigations, looking to see if that offender has prior victims. And number three, they're doing intensive training of their ADAs focused specifically on these drug-facilitated sexual assault cases to be able to combat the unique challenges associated with those cases. So my question to you is, can you tell us about any work that you're doing on those three areas, drug recognition experts, investigating perpetrator backgrounds, and training of ADAs for drug-facilitated sexual assault? Thank you so much.
Sure, Jane. I don't know about question one. I don't have an answer for you about what experts we are using, but I do know that our sex crimes unit regularly uses experts to explain symptoms and actions to the jury that it otherwise might not understand. So we clearly use experts all the time. I don't know what experts we have retained in the area of drug-facilitated sexual assaults. We certainly, our assistants are confronted by all kinds of sexual offenses where the victim's ability to perceive and report is compromised. And those cases are difficult. Certainly in the alcohol syndrome cases, we have brought many cases to trial. Some we've won, some we haven't, where the victim's ability to recount what happened is compromised. And there was the case several years ago, my first year as DA, involving two police officers, Mata and Morena, who were charged and indicted for taking a highly intoxicated young woman up to her room and sexually assaulting her. And that was not a case that they did not convict the police officers of rape. They did convict the police officers of lesser charges. So I think vis-a-vis education of our assistants and commitment to taking on cases even where the evidence is challenging, I think the work of our office is good and it is strong. Certainly we can learn from other offices, and we do all the time in every aspect of the law. But I agree with you that acquaintance rape cases are ones where the prosecutors investigating those cases have to take more time. Sometimes they are harder to sort through, but they are certainly no less significant. Nor should they be discounted simply because there is some prior relationship or prior connection between the parties. And I think the work you're doing and your organization doing is fantastic. We haven't always agreed on every case, but notwithstanding that, I know your intent is to inspire prosecutors to do the best they can for your clients, and my intent as the DA is to inspire my prosecutors to do the very best that they can and to charge the right people where we have the evidence to convict, and I believe that we do.
Next question.
Yes, thank you very much, Sandy Hecker. My question involves immigration, and I believe it's going to become increasingly difficult for the police department and the DA's office to deal with both documented and undocumented immigrants, particularly women where I think there would be an increase of violence against them and afraid to report it because they might be deported. Child abuse. I mean, I can go on and on. Do you have a plan in place should there become executive order that sanctuary cities like New York City be targeted for immigration control and deportation, whether it be a nonviolent or a violent crime? I mean, or a misdemeanor. How do you plan on dealing with it?
First and foremost, the statistics that I talked about, reducing the number of people coming into the system, that is, number one, is to have less contact with the justice system in the first place. So if I've reduced my incoming group by 25 or 30%, those folks are not going to be in anyone's data bank, right? And so that's something we've been doing, but I think, in fact, it is prudent and appropriate, particularly at this time. Our office technically does not fall under the institutions to which an executive order of this kind would apply. It is our policy as an office not to report the immigration status of our victims or our witnesses. In violent crime cases, I believe that we have those individuals are picked up and deported, and I must say that I don't feel that's wrong, but I do ask our assistants to keep in mind in their charging decisions and in their plea bargaining decisions the immigration consequences of their actions. So the message to my assistants is, in doing what we have to do, we have to be sensitive to the consequences of our decisions, and that should play a part in our analysis. The police department, I think the police commissioner recently said that he's not going to be the civil enforcement arm of the federal government, and I concur with that. What we need, what most folks don't understand, at least in my view. Let's say someone you love is the victim of a serious crime, and the witness that can put that case together is a young undocumented woman. Right? You do not want to disincentivize that woman or that man from coming forward to the police. In fact, you want to incentivize him or her to do that, and exactly the opposite we want to apply. So I think the message that the NYPD and that our office is sending is to do our job, to protect our communities, we have to have a relationship with the immigrant community that is one that is not hostile and one that's distrustful. And we honor that relationship by being prudent with our charging decisions, by being aggressive in only bringing those cases that truly should be criminal cases and trying to get rid of the low-level offenses from coming in the first place, and by not disclosing the immigration status of our witnesses and defendants. Yes, I know you've been.
My question is a follow-up.
Yep.
I'm concerned. I appreciate your comments, and you certainly stated the problems of engaging the immigrant community in civil rights of theirs and others. But I'm worried about what might be the appropriate role perceived by the NYPD on the street with regard to cooperating with ICE in our sanctuary city, especially with regard to the comments that the Police Sergeants Union president, Ed Mullen, made on Sunday. And
What were his comments?
well, he's basically, this was reported, I guess it was on Cansanide's radio station, and it was
You're as bad as I am.
New York, reported in New York Times Magazine, but it basically that most of the policemen really did want to cooperate with ICE, and they felt a moral obligation to do this, and they felt torn by the federal edicts, which of course are changing every second, so it's kind of hard to know. But we want, this is not a consensus question, but it's how do we build trust when the Police Sergeants Union is making comments like this publicly, and what should a policeman feel, and what should immigrants on the street feel about going up and seeing law enforcement as their aid rather than someone who may lead to their deportation?
Well, I think to ask the question is to answer it. I think you've answered it, which is I can't speak for Eddie Mullins, who I know, and I can't speak for a police officer, but I do believe that many police officers are interested in creating cooperation so that witnesses and victims will come forward more than they are sending someone away from the United States, deported them for a minor offense. And I think that the lawyer, the general counsel for the police department, said that as recently as the last day or so. I'm sure there's some police officers who probably disagree with that, who feel that they have a different view. But my general sense is the police department from the top is really quite sensitive to this issue, and that's because Jimmy O'Neill understands that he's got a city to police, and he wants to get rid of the violent offenders, but he wants to create an environment where police can cooperate with the communities as opposed to one that is divisive between them.
Hi, my name is Debbie Meyer. I'm not the famous education reformer Debbie Meyer, though. I spent several years as a board member of a reentry organization called College and Community Fellowship, and learned about mass incarceration and other reentry issues. And also as the parent of a public school student who is dyslexic. And so I'm going to put some of the things together that you mentioned. I started looking at the intersection of mass incarceration and dyslexia. Found the rate was 3 times as high as the general population of dyslexia. Similar results with mental illness, similar results with homelessness. But I also found that there's only 25 teaching colleges in the whole country that prepare teachers to teach dyslexic kids. In New York City, we have about 2,000 seats for dyslexic kids or in the specialized schools. The amount of money that New York City is paying to educate my dyslexic son could provide teacher preparation in our colleges. Would you consider helping to make some investments in teacher preparation so that we can teach dyslexic kids to read in our schools so they never get to the mental illness, never get to prison, and become productive citizens?
The process we have is a process that we have to consider proposals in sort of a formalistic way. So the answer is yes. I won't be doing the deciding, but if you go to cjii.org, it lays out the process for tapping into these funds. I'll ask Emily Tuttle, who's with me here. I simply don't know if that issue, that is teaching to these groups that need special attention, is something where we have made a determination that we're going to invest. But if you go to that website, you'll get it. You'll see what we've done and what we're doing. But then there is a process which involves actually folks other than myself. We have a committee that screens these things so that there's not just all my friends who get money. But please take a look at it. And Emily, if you can maybe leave a card and see if we can explore it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. We'll have 3 more questions. One of them will be mine, so I'm claiming moderator privilege. And then Melissa and Rita.
I just wanted to ask, I guess, about the dovetail of people struggling with mental health and youth offenders and education and, general prevention. I'm wondering if you've thought at all about collaborating more with service providers in terms of identifying people with their NICIDs. So, for example, I work with an organization where we serve the mentally ill as an alternative to incarceration program. Right. But if they go missing or they're in hospitals, often we spend a lot of time and resources trying to locate them. And as you know, it's surprising sometimes how much in the courts is still done by paper and not automated compared to other industries. Right. So I'm wondering, in terms of the amount you're investing, have you guys thought at all about using the NICIDs with other systems to keep better track? The
NICIDs being the criminal identification number?
Yeah, and just generally trying to get things more electronic.
In terms of identifying folks who are at risk?
And just keeping track of where they are, whether in hospitals, service providers, and just trying to streamline things. Yeah,
that's a great. Emily's going to take that idea down. The answer is I don't think we have, but we are definitely funding all sorts of providers. Perhaps not using that specific NICIS. Well, there's the thought. Yeah, no, but I think clearly. There is data that is out there that exists. Some of it is privileged because it's medical data. If you want to know, if you could identify the woman who had been to the hospital 5 times in the last 6 years for various injuries, or be able to identify which kids are the most truant in the school, there is data out there that can bring you upstream and give you sort of an indication as to this family or this kid are ones that you ought to reach out to. And we are very much looking and trying to figure out responsible, smart ways of looking at data, getting access to city data that can help flag or throw a flag on a family or a kid who needs help.
Not just data, physically tracking them or, being able to locate them, using modern technology.
That I honestly doubt we have considered, but it sounds perfectly logical.
Hi, I'm Rita Zimmer from Housing Plus and the Women's Community Justice Project, and thank you very much for a really very vivid presentation that I think really was enlightening, and I appreciate it. I'm a Manhattan resident, so I really appreciate the work you do.
Thank you.
I live at Union Square. Anyway, I was really impressed with some of the projects and programs that you described to reduce the number of people going to Rikers or to state prison. And I think that certainly is, really important, because I think we all know that if you don't go there the first time, the second chance that you won't go there a second time. And so we can keep more and more people out. I was interested in hearing, are there any other programs that you're thinking of that would also look at reducing the number of people who would end up at Rikers or in state prison? And also, I wondered what's your thinking on the regard to the movement to close Rikers? And I'd be really interested in hearing some of your thinking as to what the feasibility of that is, and certainly reducing it, but closing it.
As to other programs, I think the answer is I'm sure we have other programs that I just haven't. I know we have other programs that I've just failed to mention that focus on prevention strategies. And Emily, I know we've got them. Yeah. As to Rikers Island, I will tell you I don't have the answer. But here's how I think about it. I think no one should be, we ought to be able to pull every single file of someone who's in Rikers Island, and looking at that file, be able to say, I understand why this person is in as opposed to out. I believe that if we do that, the hope is that if we do that, we can continue to reduce the Rikers population to a level that is low enough so that the individuals can be taken from Rikers, and if they have to be in a correctional facility prior to trial, or if it's folks who are prior to trial who are in Rikers and in on bail, or who have been sentenced to a year or less than a year in prison, to move them to their home counties. But you need to build in each one of those home counties, therefore, a facility to bring those folks back to the county. Now, the truth, you have to have that facility because there are going to be folks that are going to stay in prison. There are going to be folks who simply, we can't not have in prison, even at this stage of the proceedings. But if we can reduce the Rikers population and create the best in class, best practice facility in each of the counties, yeah, then I think you could close Rikers. Now, easy for me to say. I'm not the mayor, and I don't have to. I don't have to convince the communities that building a new correctional facility in their community is a good thing, or better than having them at Rikers. And I don't have to spend the $800 million or $1 billion to do that construction. I think the mayor, as far as I understand his comments, I don't know if he's landed on it, but I don't think he's. I think my sense is that he thinks this is not going to be realistic, at least in the near term. I testified in front of the Rikers Commission, and what I said, pretty much what I just said to you, but I do think Rikers is a little bit like Alcatraz in San Francisco. I think it represents something that is become toxic, and then everything associated with it is toxic. So San Francisco managed to close Alcatraz, and the city didn't fall apart. We could close Rikers Island, I believe, without the city falling apart, but it would require a huge investment of resources, a lot of time, and the willingness of the city council and the local community residents and leaders to accept prison facilities in their own county, new prison facilities.
Great. So, District Attorney Vance, here's my question. I was struck by the overall optimism of your presentation and was really intrigued by the innovative programs that you are deploying into communities and to prevent recidivism or people getting into prison in the first place. So I have a two-part question. One is, are these programs shared with the DAs across the other boroughs? And what can we look for as a 5-borough city, the opportunity for replication and taking these programs to scale? And regarding the programs where you're going to create the hubs, what will be the accountability measures in terms of determining impact and, again, taking these programs to scale?
I think our office, in the first $250 million of investments, or $300 million of investments that we committed, were citywide projects. One was NYCHA, all 5 boroughs. One was a grant to the police department, $100 million. And it has revolutionized how the police officers work, because they now have smartphones, which they didn't have before, which are able to access the data from the mainframe computer, videos from housing developments, criminal records, understand who, as they come up on a crime scene, who have domestic incident reports in that building. So the cops are smarter. They can therefore be smarter in their decision making. Being able to understand, it empowers them. So that was another $100 million. The mental health initiative, and so we've invested significantly in citywide, not just Manhattan projects. This project about youth hubs, I really felt, and I think we feel the need to try it ourselves first, and that I'm hopeful that it will be successful, but I do believe that we've invested in the city. I think it's important that I also invest specifically in Manhattan strategies to see if they work. And then if they work, which I hope they will, and I expect most will, then if they prove themselves, then they should be funded by the city, or they should pick up private funding. We can't fly this airplane forever. If it's a good idea, I think money will come. And the second part was on one of the process of selection of the grantees has been a rigorous one. And in each grant, there are metrics which are studied and need to be met. So, for example, in NYCHA, we deliver funding for the next set of investments once they've demonstrated that they have completed the prior one. So it is sort of a step-on-step funding, and the youth hubs and the associated organizations will themselves be examined by the City University of New York, and we will see outcomes, and we'll then know, is this working or is this not working, or do we need more time? But it's not just a blank check. I think we understand very well, which is why I've got these smart people working for me who are all criminal justice professionals from the, worked in this area. I've asked them to work on it because they understand how to measure success in these programs in a way that I don't, certainly. And with CUNY, I think the combination is going to be good.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. And in closing, I'd like to recognize Bikha Pham, the Director of Policy from the Public Advocate's Office. Public Advocate Tish James couldn't be here with us today and asked Bikha to represent her. So thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing you on March 7th at the Julie Selfo Meet the Author event and March 14th when we talk about paid family leave. Thank you and have a great evening. Bye.